What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, or wherever you are, and whatever time it is, and welcome back to another video with your man, Immersiaholic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 7 of my Parthian campaign for the Divided to Impera overall mod for Total War Rome 2. Today, ladies and gentlemen, pretty much everything that could go wrong does go wrong, and this will be happening throughout the episode, so strap yourselves in for a rocker. This is going to get pretty hectic. However, we will start off by finishing the Seleucids off once and for all. Arsaces II is leading an expedition to northern Syria, to the city of Tarsos, and he will eliminate their last and final bastion of Seleucid civilization. So this is great. We're finally kicking out the major player in the east, the Seleucids. However, there are more that will be causing us issues. However, since we are at war with Lydia and Pergamon, and they have a lot of armies that are directed our way, I'm just going to liberate Tarsos. So we'll basically create a small little Greek city-state out of Tarsos. Hopefully they will be able to help us stem the tide against the Lydians and the Pergamon people. But whether they'll be helpful or not is another thing entirely. But that's what we're going with anyway for now. Unfortunately, to the west, you can see Lydia has two massive armies that are coming right at us. And to the north, Pergamon has an army stationed at the city of Mazaca. So that is very, very scary indeed. Thankfully, the new city-state that we liberated is very thankful, and so they'll give us a fair bit of money to help us finance our war against the Lydians and the Pergamon people, or Pergamese, I guess you should say. Yeah, it's Mazaca. Okay, just wanted to make sure about that. Arsaces is trapped though. We can't get away from Tarsus quick enough, and the Pergamon army does catch up to him. We will be able to retreat to the cliffs on the ocean here. And thankfully, because of that, the Pergamon army will actually not be able to assault our position. So what we did then is paid the people of Tarsus to join our war against Pergamon, and then we auto-resolved them away, and so that was that. However, now we have our first major thing going wrong. We have a secession. That's right, we have a civil war going on in Parthia. The House of Sura and the Parthian nobles have basically abandoned Otanes I, who is our current Shah, otherwise known to some as Otanes the Pretender. They apparently deem him unworthy of serving, and they have now taken over their territories that they were given to administer of Syria, and they're in full-blown rebellion. Unfortunately for them, though, they did it at a very bad time where they only have a couple small armies at their disposal. Their leader is currently leading a small group of men into Mesopotamia. Here you can see on the tactical map, they basically own all of our possessions in Syria. So it's not a big revolt. It could have been worse if they had half of Mesopotamia, but they don't. Archanes will actually lead out a small group of cavalry from the capital of Seleucia, and from there he'll actually kill the leader of this revolt in one turn straight away. So we actually got very lucky with that. We did have to kill some very elite troops, but since they betrayed our Shah, they have to die anyway. Meanwhile, back in the west, Arsaces has a very worn down and lackluster army. After defeating that Pergamon army, his troops are definitely in the process of recovering, and they are not ready for a fight. However, he still has to lead an assault on Antioch. If we don't nip this rebellion in the bud straight away, who knows what could happen to Parthia. So now Arsaces has to assault the city of Antioch with a small amount of troops at his disposal. Thankfully, though, we actually won't be assaulting the city per se. What we're doing is we're attacking an army stationed outside of Antioch, and the garrison of Antioch will be reinforcing them. So hopefully we can wipe them all out here and avoid fighting in the city itself entirely, which will obviously save a lot of our own soldiers' lives. The army that we're attacking is now the new leader of the rebellion, and he's leading a large cavalry contingent waiting for his garrison troops of Antioch to arrive. The battle begins with Arsaces leading a cavalry attack along the side of this hill here. The enemy has their cavalry stationed high up on the hill, and they are bombarding our troops with their own cataphract horse archers, and then they actually charge on down and get a pretty solid charge against their own cataphracts, which is unfortunate. However, we have more cavalry coming up to support, and they will charge in. And Arsaces himself is actually up here getting involved, and so he will help out we're basically trying to assassinate the leader of the rebellion here, and if we can keep killing off their leaders, then it means that they won't have the leadership necessary to put up a long and sustained fight against the central authority of Parthia. So far it's going very well here. We even get a nice downhill charge against the enemy cataphracts here, so that's very nice. I know it's probably a little confusing for you guys because you're seeing Parthians fight Parthians, but basically we are the guys that are doing all of the killing. At least most of the killing, although their cavalry is excellent. However, while we were doing that, the enemy garrison has now marched away from Antioch and is finally in range to reinforce the enemy cavalry. So we're going to have to try and pull out of this fight quickly. However, the leader of the enemy right here is leading his personal bodyguard away from the battlefield, and he'll be chased down, and he'll actually be killed by our median skirmishers here who are chasing him down to the edge of the battlefield, like I said. So that's very good. Overall, our cavalry engagement went very well for us. However, the infantry that we have at our disposal is very, very limited, and the garrison that's marching against us is actually quite large. It's almost a full-blown army in its own right. So we have 3 units of melee troops that will be holding high up on this mountain here, and then we have some Syrian heavy archers holding in reserve, basically trying to get as many free kills as possible. And so this is going to be a very awkward situation indeed. Our men are in a very defendable position on this cliff here, but having only 3 melee troops trying to hold off basically a whole army's worth of troops coming at them, this is going to get very, very ugly very quickly. We need to rotate our cavalry back and try and get involved as quickly as possible with them getting some rear charges in. The Syrian archers are pouring in arrows constantly. It's almost like they're raining down from the sky, and it's not stopping. But while that's occurring, Arsaces finally has his cataphracts rotate back, and now we'll be getting some decent downhill charges into the enemy, although they're charging into some heavy Parthian spearmen. So because of that, they actually won't be doing too well. It will take them quite a few charges to actually get some substantial kills against them. Turning the UI back on for a sec, you can see how this battle is developing. We still have cavalry down in the valley trying to track down the enemy skirmishers. Up here on the side of the mountain, our archers are starting to run out of ammunition, and then they will have to start doing melee engagements of their own. And our melee troops are being overrun in the center. They have a massive amount of infantry already basically pinning our infantry against the mountain. So our cataphracts are still doing our rear charges where we're cycling in and out. We're trying to do the best we can, although it's hard to get some clean downhill charges just because of the terrain and infantry positioning. Arsaces' bodyguard is actually really diminished because of the cavalry fight earlier, and because of that he won't be able to do too much here, so instead he's going to be just behind his troops, offering as much encouragement and leadership as possible. The Syrian archers use the last of their barrages, and then shortly here in just a moment they'll be engaging in melee entirely. Just before they lose their last set of arrows, we do have them use some flaming arrows to try and demoralize the enemy. Having their brothers in arms get set on fire definitely demoralizes them, and we're trying to do that in conjunction with doing rear charges across the entire back line. And up here, higher up on the hill, we get some troops routing back down towards the center. We're starting to get some small routes occurring. However, the more professional troops are still holding out against our Babylonian spearmen here. On the right flank, they're fighting our Parthian men-at-arms, which are basically professional axemen. And these troops are holding out very well, although they get a very nice rear charge from one of our cavalry units. And even though it's uphill, which diminishes our charge, it's enough to damage them around, just enough to get that side of the battlefield routing. And once we had that flank routing, as well as the left-hand flank, the center finally collapses, and we slaughter the Parthian betrayers to a man. And here are the statistics if you do wish to see them. Unfortunately, we did take quite a few casualties, even though it's only 437. 400 is quite a lot considering we only had 1,700 men. So Arsaces' army is actually even more diminished than what it was before, which is really, really bad. However, we do end up killing pretty much the entire garrison. A few troops do end up retreating back to the city, and they will hide inside the walls, although at this point, it doesn't matter too much, and we'll be able to basically auto-resolve and take Antioch back. So Arsaces manages to capture the city, basically within a turn of it rebelling, so that's excellent news for us. Here he is, here just auto-resolving them away. He won't take too many casualties, and he basically needs to recruit new units anyway, so I'm not too worried about suffering losses at this point. He only loses 50 men taking the city back. His personal bodyguard is severely depleted though, so we're going to have to replace them soon. However, Antioch somehow had all of its buildings converted in just the one turn there, so that's going to take a while to fix. In the meantime, Armenia is attacking one of our allies. They're attacking the Armenian city-state that we basically liberated. Unfortunately, we just can't afford a war with Armenia at this point. They're becoming too large and powerful, and they have too many armies, so we have to break our alliance and let our allies go there. Shah Otanes, in the meantime, is at Hatra, recruiting an army of all cavalry to try and deal with the rebellions of Syria. It was going well, and he's getting some good troops. However, he then hits a plague, and he's had a couple plagues now, and it's just not going very well for him. Although, despite the plague hitting his army, he still has to push forward and take Thapsacos before the House of Surin has enough time to regroup and recruit a whole new brand new army. So him and Arsakis will be leading their respective armies together to retake Syria. However, Armenia doesn't care that we betrayed our allies to not help them, and instead Armenia is attacking us in a surprise war. It's been a while since we fought Armenia. We kind of betrayed them a while ago, and so I guess this is the karma for it. They're powerful, they have a lot of territory, and they have a lot of armies, and they don't have many enemies. In fact, we're the only enemy right now. So that means we will face the full brunt that Armenia has to offer. This is absolutely terrible news. This could not have happened at the worst time. We're in the middle of a civil war. And even then, Armenia absolutely knows that. They target Antioch. Antioch is taken within a single turn. Thankfully, Arsakis just left the city with his army. Otherwise, he would have been killed in the fighting. There's no way he could have held off such a massive army led by that king. And Armenia does a massive betrayal against us. This is terrible news. They have so many troops coming at us, and they have so much territory bordering us. You can see here on the tactical map the amount of cities that they have. They basically border all of our northern territories and a little bit of our eastern half as well. So all of our cities are at massive risk of being assaulted basically within a single turn without us knowing. So this is horrendous. Like I said, we're still in the middle of a civil war. Our armies are starting to suffer from plagues, and as a result of this new war being declared, we now have enemy agents coming into our territory, and they will be hampering our income massively. So this is just all out. It's looking really, really bad. Thankfully, though, we get a little bit of good news. Arsakis will lead an assault on Thapsacos to deal with the last remaining remnants of the Sovereign Rebellion. Thankfully, it goes off pretty well. He does lose some troops, and I did fight the Battle of Mangali, though, but it's not really worth showing you guys. So anyway, we'll continue moving forward. We only lost about 65 men in exchange for taking the city. However, in his fury and frustration, Arsakis unleashes his army on the city, and they loot the city to the ground. This will help finance the war against Armenia, and it ends the civil war.
Many men wish to be remembered, to change the world and leave some sign of greatness. But only the strongest can seize immortality.
And there we have the Parthian noble faction being destroyed. The House of Surin rebellion is over. However, things immediately continue to get worse. The Greek city-states of Anatolia are now joining in the war with Armenia against us. They're basically just trying to get a little bit of territory before we end up being wiped out. So this is looking incredibly bad. However, Otanes the First is sick of this. He is getting old in his age. He's almost about 50 years old, which is old for the time period. And in his fury and basically arrogance, he forces Arsakis to give him all of his infantry, and Otanes is going to lead a counterattack against the Armenians in trying to take Antioch. He received word that the Armenian army left Antioch, and it did. It actually went out and wiped out our ally that was at Tarsos. However, the Armenians have another army coming in from Samosata. That is a massive army, and Shah Otanes does not have a full army whatsoever to try and repel them. So this could be the end of the Shah. He's made a massive blunder here. in his fury and rage of wanting to retake Antioch, he's basically guaranteed that the one counterattack he was going to initiate is going to fail. So that's looking really, really rough for us. In the meantime, we're trying to garrison Palmyra with some levy troops along with their governor. In the meantime, Arsaces is also leading his troops back to Hatra to continue recruiting an all-cavalry army. We basically have to go back to our old school roots of doing the old Parthian ancient form of warfare, which is, of course, the horse archer. So he will be basically rehiring a personal bodyguard so it's nice and full, and then he'll be continuing to recruit some Parthian horse archers and cavalry units in order to counter the Armenian and Kartli advance. The Kartli have joined the Armenians in this war, by the way. And here it is, ladies and gentlemen. Otanes I, otherwise known as the Pretender, is now being assaulted by the Armenians. He does retreat once, but after that, it is it. He now is in an impossible situation, and he has to make a final last stand here against Armenia. Here he is himself, leading his personal bodyguard here, trying to give a rousing speech. It's pretty bad, pretty bad speech. So he's just talking about how his men will reap the spoils of the battle here, but it just doesn't seem likely. He's going up against over 8,000 troops, and he has about 3,500 of his own, none of which are excellent troops. He only has like one Babylonian unit. In front of him, though, he actually has some Cretan archers he was able to recruit, along with the veteran Syrian heavy archers from Arsaces. He was basically forced Arsaces to give him those infantrymen, so they will be useful, but they're basically going to be wasted here unless a miracle can happen and he can somehow win this battle, but it seems unlikely. The main battle line here is made of Arabian mercenary spearmen. These guys are actually pretty decent, fairly heavily armored, have nice big shields, but they're not very well disciplined, not like our Babylonians here. You can see our Babylonians on the edge of the formation here. They're much more disciplined, have a tighter formation, and they still have very good equipment, so they'll be helpful. Otanes was able to recruit some levies from the local towns, but the levies are going to be very disheartened and not going to fight to the death. The battle begins, of course, with our heavy archers releasing their arrows into the enemy. We have a massive swarm of Armenians charging at us. Even the king of Armenia is actually leading this battle against us, and he's leading with a cavalry charge into our spearmen. He doesn't care. He apparently wants to instill fear and terror into Otanes and his men. And the Syrian heavy archers respond in the only way they know how, which is, of course, with volley after volley after volley of arrows. And while it is probably looking like it's in vain, at least, it is very spectacular, and they'll be getting a lot of kills on some very expensive cavalry units that otherwise would be doing a lot of damage to some of our troops. On the right-hand flank, our Syrian elephants are getting involved. However, they're going up against spearmen. The entire enemy army is made out of spears, basically, and they're just doing a little bit of a YOLO charge. There's not really a lot going on here. Otanes actually comes out and helps support the elephants with his personal bodyguard, and then the elephants get a nice cycle charge into some of the heavy Armenian spearmen here. So they will get some nice kills, and they'll even cause a little bit of routing amongst some of the less disciplined troops here. But the heavy Armenian spearmen will hold, and they will be able to withstand our elephants. But Otanes is getting involved with his personal bodyguard. He's trying to be proactive, but like I said, he's getting old. It's only a matter of time until he's struck down. On the far side of the battlefield, on our left-hand flank, the levies are already retreating. They were pushed off the hill that they were holding, and they just couldn't handle it whatsoever. Further down the main battle line, though, the main center is holding. Our Babylonians on the left are actually holding very well, despite them being surrounded. Here they are right now, being attacked from all sides because our levies routed. Moving down the battlefield, we see our Arab spearmen are doing pretty good, actually. They are just mercenaries, though, and because of that, they won't be willing to fight to the death, and pretty soon, if the battle doesn't sway in their favor, they probably will end up routing. The enemy main battle line has engaged completely across our whole battle line, spear against spear right now, but the enemy has some very nice troops to counter our spearmen, has some very nice Georgian swordsmen in particular. In the meantime, our elephants are continuing to do their charges. However, finally, after all this time, Otanes is struck down. His personal bodyguard dismounts from their horses in order to try and protect his body and not let their Shah be left on the battlefield to rot. But at this point, this is where the battle completely turns against us 100%. Otanes is struck down while he was trying to support our elephants, and his personal bodyguard won't even end up dying and fighting to the death. They'll instead rout from the battlefield, and seeing the personal bodyguards rout from the battlefield, the rest of our main battle line completely routs, with a lot of our men still being alive, but they were done with it. The Arabs are leaving the battlefield. They're definitely not going to be dying for a Parthian Shah, at least not anytime soon, until some loyalty is built up with them. In the meantime, our Babylonians are making a final last stand, but eventually even they rout from the battlefield. And ladies and gentlemen, we lose Shah Otanes the First. Here are the stats if you do wish to see them. Unfortunately, at least half of our army was able to retreat from the battlefield, which shows a massive amount of dishonor. And it's a shame, really, because that means this army will be annihilated with a lot of its units actually surviving. But you can see, though, a lot of them were actually just not levies, but they were new recruits, not very many veterans whatsoever. But now we have the funeral for Otanes the First. The pretender is finally dead. He was known to some as the Pretender, others as the Great. There's no denying, though, without him, Parthia might not have accomplished as much as it has since its humble and troubled origins. But thankfully, he did lead Parthia into a new age, an age of the possibility of empire. And so, unfortunately, though, he leaves Parthia now in its darkest hour. And the Armenians did not give us any time whatsoever to grieve, and instead the city of Tushpa will be assaulted by some rebels. We will actually win the auto resolve against the rebels here, but I only auto resolved it because I knew the Kartli Armenians had a massive army each outside of the city, so we will be losing Tushpa very soon. Otanes is now gone. However, Arsakis II is declared as his successor. I had no idea why. He wasn't chosen as the heir. That man Vishtaspa of the Arsakid dynasty was selected as the heir, so I'm not sure why he didn't get it. I'm guessing because he isn't part of the other nobles section on the right-hand side. But either way, I'm happy with this. Arsakis II is basically a true Arsakid, so he should be the Shah. He should have already been Shah, so that is good news. He's basically one of the biggest reasons that we've also done so well, and he will continue the fight in the name of Parthia. So all hail Arsakis II, Shah of Mesopotamia, Syria, Palmyra, and in the future, hopefully, all of the East. But for now, he needs to focus. He doesn't have time to grieve or reform or anything. Instead, he is still focusing on recruiting his all-cavalry army. However, while he's doing that, the Armenians push their advantage and end up taking Thapsakos within the next turn. That means that Armenia now has all control over Syria in its entirety. That is really, really bad news for us. We might have to consider letting Syria go completely. Right now, this isn't even a border war or anything like that. This isn't a set of skirmishes. This is a full-blown invasion, and the Armenians are demonstrating that entirely here in Syria. In the meantime, like I said, Tushpa is being assaulted by the Armenians and their Kartli allies. It's basically an Armenian stronghold that we've had for quite a while now. It's a terrible city, though. It has barely over 2,000 people living inside of it, and it's been nothing but a source of rebellion for us, so I don't care if we lose it. If anything, good riddance, to be honest. In the meantime, though, more Greek city-states are joining the fight against Parthia. The Archbosporus Kingdom of the Northern Black Sea is actually joining in the war. It's unlikely they'll actually do anything against us because they're so far away, but it is actually noted and it's noteworthy that they are declaring war on us. Once we recover and deal with the Armenians, we will definitely have to exact revenge on them as well. We have a revenge list as long as there are nations in the game at this point. In the meantime, at Thapsacos, the Armenians have two massive armies there, one of them led by our king. Shah Arsakis II is leading a basically cleansing operation around Hatra. We have rebellions going throughout our entire nation at this point. Armenia, our Armenian city, had a rebellion. Syria had rebellions. Now Mesopotamia has rebellions, and Palmyra isn't too far away from having its own rebellions either. So we're completely falling apart at this point. Finally, Tushbek gets a nail in the coffin and the Armenians take the city. I didn't even bother fighting it and trying to kill as many of the enemies as I could, because I know they're going to recover within just a turn or two anyway. We're playing on hard difficulty, keep in mind, so the enemy gets bonuses that help them rejuvenate their armies and reinforce them after taking losses. So unless I can attack an enemy army within the next 2 or 3 turns after it, I'm not going to bother trying to do a last-ditch stand there. However, the city of Jura is now being attacked, and here I will actually manually fight the battle. Not only will we be able to try and inflict casualties on the enemy, but this is the Armenian king himself that is attacking the city. So possibly if we could kill him, this could really swing the war in our favor. He's an excellent general with a lot of stars to his reputation. Hopefully we can kill him and put in a very severe nail into the Armenian coffin. Here is captain of the garrison, chilling in some concrete. He's basically just trying to give a small rousing speech to his garrison. He knows what he has to do. He is going to die here, as are all of these men. But can they accomplish anything before doing so? Hopefully. He has the majority of his garrison in front of him here, where the enemy army is marching towards. We have a few units of archers here that will be focusing fire on the enemy cavalry, and some Syrian levy spearmen units in front. So we're basically relying on the men of the town to try and hold for as long as possible. And the battle begins with a cavalry charge. Apparently the Armenians think that they're something, and they're sending in their cavalry at the beginning of every engagement with us so far. They do a little bit of a trot charge into our men though. I mean, in reality they just weren't supposed to charge into our spears, but anyway, they trot charge into our troops, and they will take a very severe barrage of arrows while doing so. In the meantime, on the northern side of the city, the Armenians are sending in a large contingent of spearmen against our, basically our side streets, where we have only just a few men. We have an archer contingent over here though as well, so hopefully they'll be able to help tip the balance in our power. But the Armenians also send in javelin men to back up their own men, so they'll be getting a lot of kills on our troops, especially once they hit us from the flank. We end up getting a little bit of a skirmish outside of the city with our spearmen engaging the Georgian swordsmen, but because the Georgian swordsmen are swordsmen and they have over 300 men per unit, well, have exactly 300 per unit I should say, they will win that engagement. It's basically just delaying the inevitable, and it's not going to go well for us, unfortunately. Even with the archer support, it's just not good enough. Meanwhile, back at the main entrance, so the Armenian main battle line of infantry, their pikemen have finally engaged our own troops, and their pikemen, they're professionals, they will crush our main battle line here. However, one thing that has happened as well is the enemy general's bodyguard is no longer present. So I start looking all around the battlefield to see exactly what happened. I didn't get any notification that he died, and instead what we find is he is routing from the battlefield. The Armenian king is on his own here. His entire personal bodyguard was wiped out. He is the last remaining member, and he runs from the battlefield like the coward he is. This will forever stain him as a coward, and he's the Armenian king, so that's going to be a massive boost to morale for our armies moving forward. But unfortunately, in the meantime, the rest of our garrison is just not proving to be worthy of getting many kills whatsoever, and we get about a dozen kills per unit here. And eventually, after we fast forward just a little bit longer, our entire garrison routes from the battlefield, and we lose the city of Jura. Here are these statistics if you do wish to see them. As you can see, most of our units didn't really get too many kills whatsoever, even our more heavy Parthian spearmen. Our archers did okay, considering they were targeting some of the more heavy cavalry units of the enemy, but their pikemen and swordsmen were just way too good for us, so we're going to have to try and counter them with some horse archers eventually. But you'll see on the right hand side of the screen here, the enemy general's personal bodyguard literally had one man left in it. It was their king running from the battlefield. Not making that up at all. So that's interesting. Very, very lucky he escaped. Unfortunately, after we lose the city of Jura, Seleucia is now being assaulted. This is where things are getting to the absolute epitome of low. Parthia is now in the deepest dark abyss possible. We now are hitting bankruptcy. We're losing our edicts that we had established. Seleucia, our capital, is being assaulted by the Kartli. They have one massive army here. They have a second army coming from Ecbatana as well that will reinforce them in the next turn. And in the meantime, up at Hatra, the Kartli are sending in another massive army to take that city, while the Armenians actually have some small armies who are doing some raiding, which is forcing our economy to be severely low, and we are completely going into bankruptcy here at this point. So we have to be proactive. We have to make some moves. Even though Arsaces' army isn't really ready, it's going to have to be. So what we're going to do is we send a scout to check out the Kartli army. And here I'm basically debating, what do I want to do with Arsaces? Do we want to try and reinforce the capital, where we have Arsaces III holding the city with a Babylonian contingent? Do we want to go west to Jura, or do we want to go north and attack the Kartli very close by? And we make the decision to go north. This is an all-infantry army we're going up against. Now is the time for the Parthian horse archer to shine. And here we are on the battlefield. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a while since we've had an all-cavalry engagement here, at least on our part. We have our horse archers at the front, followed by our javelin men, our median skirmishers, aka our Persian skirmishers. We have Arsaces II with his personal bodyguard, and then in the rear, we have some noble horse archers who will be ready to maneuver their way around the battlefield as needed. We also, in the far rear, have our elephants along with some Cappadocian mercenaries. They will be way at the back of the battlefield and won't be involved for quite a while. And of course, we begin the battle by loosing our horse archer arrows against the enemy infantry. We'll be dragging them forward across the battle, at least across the battlefield, for quite a very long time. We have a lot of ammunition to spend here, and we are not in a rush to do so. So we basically form a leapfrog formation where our horse archers engage. Once the enemy infantry gets too close, we pull through, and our noble horse archers begin engaging, and then after they get too close, we repeat the same process once again, and we continue doing that all the while the enemy heavy infantry try to chase us down. They have a lot of heavy spearmen in particular, but they also have some levy units and a mixture of swordsmen as well. So this is definitely a group of troops that we do not want to engage in merely until we have to. While our horse archers were dragging most of the enemy troops across the battlefield, our median skirmishers, our javelin men, actually managed to surround some isolated units and basically destroy them just with their javelins. They didn't even have to charge in before the enemy troops here routed. So that was excellent. We managed to get quite a few kills on some units. We wiped out at least 2. I think it ended up being 3 units for free. And then shortly after that, we'll actually see some archers who were left on their own. And this is by the time that our median horsemen have used all of their javelins. So now is the time for us to charge in and begin trying to take out the skirmishers of the enemy. They don't have a lot, but any kind of any archer unit, I should say, is definitely going to be a big threat to any of our cavalry units. So we've got to take them out, and we'll do so with very little issue. While that was happening, though, across the battlefield, our horse archers were kiting the enemy army for so long, they actually ran into the red line. That's right, we hit the edge of the battlefield, so we're having to try and micromanage our entire contingent of horse archers to go along the edge of the battlefield and outrun the enemy infantry. And they will do that without too much issue. And by now, though, our horse archers have used all of their ammunition just about. So that is a bit of a problem. However, back across with our median cavalry, they are now entirely surrounding the enemy general, who's actually in a Armenian spearman unit, and they will be doing what I'm dubbing as the Parthian double whopper sandwich. That's right, we're getting 4 units of cavalry to charge in, twice the size of a regular Parthian sandwich, and we are annihilating the enemy general. So that is super useful. It means the enemy troops will be easy to rout now. Zooming out a little, we'll check out the battle with our UI turned on for a change. I have our median skirmishers surrounding the enemy on the right hand side here. In the center we actually have our elephants and Cappadocians forming up, and then on the far left at the top of the screen here you can see Arsakis is leading a contingent of noble horse archers around the right hand flank of the enemy. Basically we're just surrounding them entirely in small little groups of cavalry contingents. Our horse archers being basically removed from the engagement now though, because they're out of ammunition and I don't need to waste them in melee combat. As we start to see targets of opportunity, we start to send in Arsakis and his noble archers. However, the main battle line of the Kartli does manage to reinforce this one unit that's on the edge. So what we're going to do, instead of pulling away, we're actually going to just go balls deep and commit here. So Arsakis charges into a unit of spearmen. While he's doing that, the Syrian heavy elephants are coming in. And while they're doing that, our center is charging into the rear of the enemy center, and our Cappadocians will finally get involved there. So we're basically hitting the Kartli main battle line from different sides at different times instead of doing it all at the exact same time. Arsakis leads a rally cry for his men to get involved and get fired up. This is basically revenge for what the Kartli and Armenians have done so far. They've taken a series of settlements for very little cost, and the Parthians are sick of it, and so now it's time to put their foot down. And this ends with a beautiful last final charge from our Persian cavalrymen. They do a fantastic charge and end up wiping out the far side of the battlefield of the enemy infantry. And with that rout, the entire enemy army routs and they are all utterly destroyed. Here are the stats if you do wish to see them. As you can see, we lost 76 men in exchange for wiping out an army of over 4,000 men. That's incredibly powerful. Arsakis is beyond pleased that his all-cavalry army strategy worked. This is the army type of his forefathers and their forefathers before them, so this is definitely what he'll be sticking with in the future. Infantry have a place in warfare, but just not in a Parthian war, at least not for now. So he'll be leading his elite and veteran Parthian horsemen into battle. Now though, he has to decide, does he want to continue fighting in the north, or does he still want to try and rush down to Seleucia, or turn west and go target the Armenian king at the city of Jura in the province of Palmyra? He has some big decisions to make, and the life of Parthia is still very much on the line. We're still basically at the epitome of darkness here. Things are looking terrible for us, but under Arsakis' leadership, we have a new hope, dare I say it. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.